Hello and welcome to The Wizard and The Priestess. I am Nula and my co-host is...
Matt. Nula, the priestess.
Why do you say it like that?
I don't know. This is what came up.
Welcome everybody. Today we are going to move on to the growing bud and finding our boundary, and that boundary relates to or connects to the element of wood or the liver, as Matt will...
We'll go into that.
go into. But essentially what we're talking about today is the emotion of anger and how that plays out in our day-to-day, how it is functioning, how it is dysfunctioning and what that looks like, and how we have seen that express itself in the clinic. So
before we go into that, last time we started with kidneys, because you're saying that's the start of the cycle.
Yes.
So
kidneys.
can you do a
Water.
running commentary on starts in the kidney
All right, yeah.
and then goes to
The liver.
go?
Right, okay. So everything starts in darkness.
Good.
So considering that the seed of life, the seed of every idea, every thought we have, every experience is there's a seed that starts that then kind of, you could say, is from under the earth or in the darkness, and then I'm going to keep using my plant analogy. So imagine that seed is under the earth in darkness, and then there is a vibration that creates this movement that comes from the water. And it comes from that. The water is related to the kidneys in Chinese medicine, but we'll keep using the elemental words, which is water. So the water is essentially the beginning of that cycle.
Yep.
And so the water pushes and creates that movement upwards.
Yep.
And as that movement moves upwards, the unknown becomes the known. Yep. So the unknown becoming the known is sort of that movement from like that manifestation of, and so what we talked about last week was all about that idea of becoming aware of danger.
Yep.
Whereas this week we actually move into the known. So we've become the unknown, that seed that then actually sprouts. So that initial sprouting is essentially as we move into the wood. So imagining that growth of the tree is the wood.
So it's
growing
becoming
up. Conscious
now.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
And with that consciousness, it has boundary. It has a
Form.
That's it. So that form has boundary.
Yep.
And understands itself as a self.
Yep.
And so in the physical realm, we can look at that in terms of being a plant.
Yep.
And we can see this plant growing, and we can see that wood actually forming. And so as a human, we can imagine that, let's just take ourselves as humans as we are as adult humans today, that we actually have a physical form and we understand that I start and I finish. So there's like my physical form starts and finishes. And what is around me, well, we can go many layers in that, but essentially just considering that physical form, this is where I am physical. And then outside of that, once you go past and beyond my physical form, I'm no longer there.
Right.
So imagining that is my boundary.
Okay.
So that is essentially...
Where does that stop?
Well...
I mean, from a physical
form, our physical... Well, from the physical aspect, this is all my own...
Yeah.
Like all the ideas of my own thinking coming together. But essentially the physical aspect, I would say it does stop maybe a centimetre above the body because you've got the vibration of the cells that atoms are actually there.
Yeah.
You can actually feel someone.
Yeah.
You can create energy. Like you can bring your hands together.
So that's your personal space.
That is your personal space.
Yep.
Some people have a need for more personal space because they might be hypersensitive. And so when someone moves into the realm a little bit closer, but I wouldn't say that's their physical form.
Right.
I would say that is more like they are more connected to that next layer, which would be starting in their aura. Okay. Which would be moving past their actual physical form. So when we're talking today, I'm talking about the physical form and the breaking of that boundary, or maybe not the breaking of that, but the awareness of where that boundary and form begins and ends. So like if I was to touch hands, like I know you kind of miss where you begin and end. Yeah. And but essentially that is my form. Yep. Okay. So in TCM, the way that I utilize this understanding is that the wood is correlated to the liver. And when the wood when the liver is out of balance or in disharmony, we start to see things when the wood is in function,
Yep.
it is growing strong. It
Yep.
is malleable.
Yep.
It is. It has the ability to bend and move.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's still very stable.
Yep.
It has its roots deep into the earth that feels that maintain its stability.
Yep.
But it can grow big and strong, and it's still it can be bent. It can be moved. So what you want to see or understand is that we're meant to be that.
Yeah,
We're meant to have a steadfast base. We're meant to have a strong foundation. We're meant to be like the tree that actually is really stable on the ground, but also can move with the breeze easily.
Yeah.
But has the strength to maintain its form.
Yep. So it's very adaptable.
Yes.
To the environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we think of, and then obviously we're correlating that to the emotion today, and that emotion from my perspective is anger. Mm-hmm. And what we find that anger exists when our current understanding of our physical form, when our boundary of our physical form is crossed.
Okay.
And it is
both physically and kind of metaphorically.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah.
Yeah. So if
that's when we tend to see things as a personal attack.
Yes.
We store that in the liver. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm going to throw to you, Matt, is what does healthy anger look like? Healthy
anger. For me, it comes back to the boundary. Mm-hmm. And I think any emotion, let's say anger is correlate, we'll correlate anger to negative, most people would. Mm-hmm. But with any negative, there has to be a positive.
Always.
So anytime you stand up for yourself, you could class that as a positive anger, let's say. So anything where you stand up for yourself, I would put into that bracket.
Healthy anger.
Yep.
Right. And I guess following on from that, it's just holding your boundary where what feels good and what doesn't feel good.
You occupy your own space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And understandable, if someone crosses that and that feels uncomfortable, then anger is the functioning emotion that will come through. And then I guess more than anything, from my perspective, it's how you use the anger.
I could sum that up into one, I don't know, 2 hyphenated words. Is that one word or 2?
Go.
Self-esteem.
Right.
Our self-esteem is held in the liver.
Okay.
Our sense of self.
Our sense of self.
Yep.
Right. And so when I see anger and the function of anger happening, a lot of the time it looks hard. It looks like a hard.
Like hardening of tissue?
Could be hardening of tissue. In TCM2, the wood element is correlated to the ligaments.
Yep.
So what we tend to see is people can't move their body.
Yeah. So in clinical terms, that's like an osis, an itis going into an osis. Osis meaning hardening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when the wood has been activated in a disharmonious way, and essentially initially when someone's crossed that boundary and the anger comes online, that's an activation. So there's an activation of the ligament to then activate through the body to get everything going in whatever direction it needs to move.
Also, that's if there is an intense emotion there, let's say anger, like an outburst of anger, there is so much energy in the nervous system at that time. The body wants to discharge it because there's too much energy in the circuit can blow the fuse. Blowing the fuse is essentially what we call disease. So it's an outlet as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so when we see anger in this way and we understand it in this way, that a boundary has been crossed, now I understand that, we can then function from a different perspective.
Yep.
And then always is like one of the greatest things is to kind of feel the anger rather than action from it.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless there is I'm going to come up with a really crappy analogy today.
It's usually me. This is nice.
I was just thinking of the car being attacked by the car. But anyway, no, but it's more like I don't know when this would be possibly like reasonable. But I guess in terms of if an adult were to attack a child and you were in the vicinity of that moment, there would be a part of movement that probably would move from anger or like, and then it would take you forth to action to save and protect that child.
Yeah.
And so my point is that what I see in the clinic is generally we sort of look at that. Anger is the overactive functionality of the wood. It's when there is like...
Is that too much?
Too much. Okay. So imagine like you have like there is so much wood that there's actually no place. There's so many trees growing all in the one place. There isn't movement.
Suffocating, right?
Yeah.
To a point, yeah.
Yeah, and there's no malleability in that.
Yeah.
There's just like wood overgrowth everywhere. So essentially we need to cut down some of those trees so that we can actually see what is there, what is and what isn't.
Yeah.
But consider that as like so much wood growing, and also see that as like this really hardened exterior.
Yeah.
And so usually what I see in the clinic is someone with a very hardened exterior, whether that's hardened on the skin, whether that's hardened in the physical, like within the interior where they can't touch their toes, or where they have like the malleability of their back is like there's restriction and constriction in their spine.
Yeah.
All of this comes back to potentially an internalized anger.
Yep.
And usually what I see is mainly in the skin in the form of eczema and things like that, where there is this friction. So there's this friction, imagining like this wood is just growing hard and fast and is decided that it's not like this is my boundary in front of me and I can reach my arms and I can move. It's like this is my boundary.
Yeah.
And you will not cross. And it's like I've built so much, like I've got this like wall around me that is built of the strongest, most steadfast wood that you can think of. You will not penetrate in. And if you touch it, I will burst. And so that is when anger has overgrown and we see this overactive. And generally when that starts to happen, we see the aggressor.
Yep.
And that's really common.
Very common, yeah.
Because also the relationship to the wood is the chi. And if the chi can't flow because the wood is too hardened and like not malleable, then there's no movement for it. There's no flow here.
Well, it leads it to disease.
Yeah.
Right? So it can't be oxygenated either.
No. So then, you've got this hardened exterior, and then anytime something penetrates or it's perceived to penetrate, there is a reaction, and that reaction comes from that place.
Yeah.
From what I've learnt this year, or last year rather, there was about anger is just the power that it has, and the power it has on like the grasp it has over us. Now, elementally, I tend to sit in wood. Shocking. But it is, so I tend to have I have a healthy relationship with anger, more and more healthy as you may have learnt over the years, Matt.
No comment.
However, the way that I think I channel more
I'm
and
just
more.
going to smile and nod through this whole thing.
Well, I'm going to just go on my own little passage here.
You go.
But the way that I find that I can understand or utilise that the knowledge is that the wood that I have set in place has been there to protect me. And that is what that anger or that angry response has been over. And now that I have been able to understand that, I don't have that angry response. But there is an aspect of the liver that is about the will and the drive. So if we have the courage from the kidney and then we have the willpower from the liver that actually gets us going.
Right.
So that is sort of what I find. You will see that in our world where there's just a drive. And that aspect comes from essentially a functioning boundary and an ability to go and get. So you actually have that courage that comes through from the water and then you move that into the wood, and then that is invigorated by the will to actually do the thing.
Does the water form the wood or shape it?
Can do.
Yeah.
But once again, it's that movement from one to the other. So it's not quite like it holds and nurtures. Yeah. However, it does support.
Yeah. Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, so the other thing that is interesting that most people don't really correlate to anger, but there is the other aspect is the underactive function of wood.
Too little.
And where it is so soft and malleable and it is just like almost, it's flimsy. It's like, I think of this in terms of we have recently been propagating what did we have? No, it fruited. So our capsicums fruited. And when they fruited, everything, it got so heavy for the actual stalk that we propped it up so that the fruit could grow. But like its form wasn't quite strong enough to hold the fruit that it was bearing. So, yeah, we propped that with more wood. And so there's this other aspect where there's this underactive wood and it still has the potential to be angry, and you'll see that in my example in a minute. But that underactive wood is sort of looking like the yes man and the people pleaser. The person that actually doesn't hold a boundary, where they don't know where they start and finish. They're kind of like constantly in symbiosis with everyone else and they're just floating and that would be, from my perspective, more in line with the yang organ of the gallbladder, where there's like this softening and this kind of like, we don't actually hold any boundary. There's no wood to look after us, so we sort of just like fluff around.
So Chinese medicine, liver, gallbladder, they're the same?
Wood.
Okay.
Wood element.
Yep. Anything else involved from that in that region?
No, we just look at the liver and gallbladder.
Yep.
You region physicality over there.
We'll get
Did you want to take that over?
All I'll go on from there is from the behavioural aspect. You're talking about too much. That would be someone who's trying to dominate someone else.
Yep.
Too little would be someone who's trying to please everyone by being, as you said, the yes man or yes woman. We don't discriminate here. So all that stored in the liver. For me, the liver is such a huge player. If I could only do one manipulation on anyone, it would just be the liver.
Yeah.
It is a huge player, not only physically but also mentally, emotionally, as we'll get into. But if you look at it like purely from an anatomical point of view, it weighs anywhere from 1 to 2.5 kilos outside the body, 800 to 900 grams inside the body. It articulates with several organs, including the diaphragm, which is a muscle, but it's the most important muscle we have. Without that, we die. You can't live without a liver, so it's a vital organ. It can regenerate, is it 2/3 or 3/4 of itself? Something like that.
Quite a lot of it.
Yeah. There's actually 8 parts to the liver. 2 parts dedicated to the mechanics, 2 parts dedicated to metabolism, 2 parts dedicated to emotion, and 2 parts dedicated to the immune system. It's a huge, huge player. But not only do we hold anger, we also hold our sense of self. So our relationship to ourselves, when you go behind closed doors, how you relate to yourself, how you talk to yourself, all of that is stored in the liver. Pessimism, any aspect of joy or lack thereof, depression, when you think, when you feel like you're a prisoner to your own routine, that's all stored in the liver. And we also hold our image of where we believe or where we think we come from. That's stored in the liver, which is the ultimate sense of self. Tracing that back psychologically as far as you can, because you come back to the image that images, which I'll go into another time. So all of that is liver.
Okay.
And I mean, even metabolically, it does over 500 things that we currently know of. And the old gallbladder sitting underneath. It's such a huge player, not only mentally, emotionally, because when we have these thoughts and feelings, we store those emotions literally in the fascia surrounding the organs. So if you're angry, let's say, for some reason, let's say I've said something really funny and you've taken that the wrong way.
Oh,
yeah,
very common
yeah.
for you.
Yeah. Then that's going to potentially tighten the fascia around the liver. that's going to adhere itself to the inside of the rib cage. Then you have a rib restriction. That can affect flow down to the right side of your body, all the way down to the toes. If it goes upwards, it can pull tension on the phrenic nerve, which communicates to the right shoulder capsule. It can create sinusitis. It can create cranial restrictions, right shoulder pain, upper neck, sacroiliac. Pretty much anything down the right side, the liver ultimately affects.
Okay, so if we have any sort of stored emotion within the fascia of the liver, we are tightening.
Absolutely.
And moving in that way.
With that tightening comes, and you go, let's say, do a workout, or you play with your kids, or you do some kind of movement. If you just get your shirt and pinch that right side of your rib cage, and then move your arm around, you can feel it pulling on your shoulder. So over time, it creates a functional compensation.
Right.
If that's not corrected, then it turns into a structural compensation. That's when it's an osis, that's when it's hardened, and that's when you're essentially married to it. And people don't realise that. Think of death itself is a 7-stage process.
Okay.
Liver toxicity comes at stage 4. When you get liver toxicity, that's when you've typically got an itis. So bronchitis, conjunctivitis, all these things show up, and that's when typically our people reach out to us because they're showing symptoms of these inflammatory diseases. Mm-hmm. And I've never met anyone that had inflammation that didn't have something going on with their liver.
Right.
So, big player.
And so when we come back to the idea of anger having a disharmonious function there, how so from my perspective, I would often look at anger being so everything from my perspective starts in the emotion. So starts with emotion, or tends to, unless it's actual physical trauma. But
even then, there's an emotional correlate, right?
Yes. So we can kind of always come back. So for me, anger generally starts from really little people who are incapable, unable, their parents are unable to hold them through their big emotion and through their expression of anger. And therefore anger has been shunned and seen as a terrible, unhealthy facet of life.
Also that the child's wrong for feeling that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, the layers of that are huge. And a lot of the time it is related to you as the parent.
Yeah.
That have also experienced that.
Sure.
So we've got this generational trauma aspect where we can't actually we can't experience anger. We're not allowed to. We're not allowed to express it. And we're not even allowed to express it in safe ways. We are shunned away from that. And
if you do, it's toxic, right?
Totally.
In our culture, yeah.
Totally. And so we close that part of ourselves, and so then it just goes in and festers.
Yeah.
And then you've got parents showing us anger all the time.
Yeah.
So I have this, a lot of the people I spend time with, we're kind of doing becoming more conscious of ourselves, becoming more conscious of the self that is destructive in many ways, and becoming learning ways to love and honor who we are, and therefore support ourselves to really see who we are, truly who we are. And it's quite interesting that I find that there's often I will go into a situation if I'm going to have a hard conversation with someone, and I'm mindful of coming in with love and coming in with understanding that the shoe needs to be seen on the other foot, and being aware of how they might feel about what I'm about to say, and trying to really go in and find love and connection, because that's the whole point. That's why I'm going to have a hard conversation. And that for me is how I will go in. But then a lot of the people the generation above, not always, and obviously there are amazing people, but mostly the only way that they are able to receive and respond is with anger. There is no consciousness to actually be able to hold space for any of that, because they were never given space to hold that anger.
Yeah, well, they don't know how to, and they wouldn't even recognize it.
No. So that the emotion for them, anger is just easy.
Yep.
It's the only way to go.
Yep.
There is no, like, even if they're feeling internally, they're feeling empathy, they're feeling sadness or disappointment or whatever it is, the response is anger. And you see that in the way that a lot of parents parent and the way that we move through this world, because children's anger is annoying and it is hard because it's showing, and it's triggering because it's showing us where we are essentially.
Yeah.
And so we have to sit in that, and like, not only are you trying to support them to experience and express, but you're also having to support yourself that didn't actually have that opportunity to experience and express.
Yeah.
So there's obviously all emotion is that too, depending on where we're being guided by our parents, and their parents have guided them. But it is so, it is really potent, and in our society, in Chinese medicine, or most commonly, that what you're describing is that torsion of the liver, I would say is qi stagnation, so a blockage of energy flow. And the qi is related to the liver. So it needs to be flowing in order to have a functioning body. But in our world, we're actually, like, everyday anger is really normal. It's been totally normalized. However, you're not allowed to express it as a child. No. And so there's like this complete disconnect from that emotion because we're being, the driver of all things. The driver like comes from fear, and then there's this anger. So there's this fear movement, like, be afraid of this, be afraid of them. They are the enemy. This is the enemy. Afraid, be fearful. And now, because we're afraid of them, let's move forward towards the enemy with aggression. And so we, like, that is like play by play what's happening.
It's like a cornered animal. Ready to lash out.
Absolutely.
And also when people get angry, they often point the finger at other people.
Blame.
And remember Carl Jung's quote, every time you point the finger at someone, you still got three fingers pointing back at yourself. So really you're just experiencing an unconscious aspect of yourself. Someone putting up the mirror to you.
Totally.
It's hard to see that in the moment, especially in traffic, but we won't go into that.
Obviously you should.
No, that's their fault.
But they're absolutely, and a friend of mine told me that last year. So last year I did a lot of like rediscovering and reconnecting to my own anger and becoming aware. Like, I mean, you wouldn't even know because like just fucking healed now. But like that analogy of like realizing how much external, like, I'm like, I'm here in my castle, I'm fucking fine, what are you doing over there in yours? Is like, actually no, I had a forest around me, and then I had to gently like kind of like trim it and then understand that, okay, it's just a gentle fence that shows me where I start and finish, and that's it. There's not like, it doesn't go beyond there.
It's also, I think, worth a mention that things like anger and pessimism, all those kind of emotions that we store in the liver, are enough to shut down the digestive system, our fire.
Which is really interesting from a TCM perspective. So if I were to show you a map of, I mean, it's just a simple ring, but we go kidney to liver and then go to heart. So where connection is, which we will come to next week.
Right.
But then we go down the other side, and that's essentially spleen, which is all digestion. The way that we look at it is the spleen is the head organ of digestion, whether or not that is the case. Physically, but metaphysically so. And so what happens is we have what really common in our society happens is we have, instead of moving from healthy anger up into connection and then moving down into digestion.
Because anger is an attempt to connect.
Right. It overacts and attacks the digestive system, like cuts across, misses the connection altogether and just cuts across and breaks that down. And that's a really common situation where we see digestive issues. So all of a sudden we've got someone with constipation, IBS, flip and flop, and it's really interesting because
even diabetes.
Yeah. And like that yes man people pleaser aspect. I see that so often in women with IBS because all of a sudden they weren't able to actually fully express. They weren't able to actually, they didn't find their form. And so the easiest way was to kind of internalize that and then just accept as everyone else has the right way. But there's this festering in that. And like what I find is like I'll have a patient who is like really eager to please me.
Because they want to say the right thing.
Totally. They give me, oh, yeah, that's working really great. I'm like, is it really? Yeah, I'm feeling fantastic. Are you really?
Their arms hanging off.
Yeah. Like, you can, like,
it's supposed to be like that.
Like, what is going on? Are you sure? And then I feel their pulse and look at their tongue or feel their body and I'm like, you're not really okay. And they're like, oh, but it could be worse. Of course it could be worse. Everything could be worse, but you're here right now. I'm going to support you. But it is quite interesting because
even a physiological reaction, that festering going on will shut off flow to the portal vein, which is a big blood supply to the liver. Right. We've got like 1.5 litres of blood going through the liver every minute. Every single minute.
Yeah, right.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
1.5 litres per minute. And if the liver can't function, the digestive system can't function. We had a digestive system before we had a brain.
Yeah.
So such a huge thing.
Yeah.
And also just even the restriction in oxygen, because the liver has connections into the anterior abdominal wall via the falciform ligament. And if that gets really tight, it shuts down diaphragm function as well. So the whole system doesn't get pumped.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're angry.
Angry. That will make you more angry.
Thanks for that anatomical class for me there. I'll have to get you to show me some pictures.
Is that angry?
What I was going to say.
I just wanted to share.
You know what, Matt? I'll write down anatomy lesson and we can go through the whole body.
We've done it now, okay.
Okay, are you done? You sorted. Okay. But what I wanted to just touch on was that even when we're being a people pleaser, there is a piece of like friction happening underneath that. And so we think we're just being this sweet, cool person, but actually at the end of the day, we're weakening our wood, we're weakening our boundary, and we're actually weakening the system itself. So what we tend to see when that starts to happen is we start to see someone with really incapabilities of blood, incapabilities of their iron levels are gone, they're shot, and we don't know why. And it's like, actually, let's just go a little bit deeper. What are you doing? Where are you wasting that away? Yeah. And a lot of the time is we're weakening our system. So you can either you weaken your system through tightness, through like holding a really hard boundary, being the aggressor, blaming everyone else around you, sitting on your tower and looking down and being like everyone else is fucked. Or you can be the other way where you're like, no, I've learnt, usually through having an aggressor as a parent or as a caregiver, I have learnt to be quiet, to go with the flow and just like blend in to the point where I'm like a soft seedling that can't actually hold myself up anymore. So we sort of see and what I tend to see with someone that is like really impacted by anger themselves, and you can see the frustration and their bodies are like tired, and they might be showing signs of like internal or repressed anger, which is usually skin. You start to see these people, but they flip from being like so hard to being exhausted.
Yeah.
To being so hard to being exhausted.
Well, because they're either completely on or completely off.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we're turning on so many different aspects of the system, but obviously from our perspective, everything is holistic. So that's why Matt can start talking about the poo-poo valve and all the things. It's like being pressed on and impacted. But I just want to, just being really mindful of the fact that whilst we are saying that, well, from my perspective, anger lives or is part of the system of the liver, it is essentially impacting the whole, and we will continue with every emotion we feel will impact the whole. Yeah. It just kind of would say the disharmony starts in that organ or starts in that area or starts with the element of wood.
Yeah. So quickly, what's a quick liver tip for people who are resonating with what you're saying?
Oh, like angry people?
Yeah.
stay calm.
You did say that.
Take a deep breath. Oh, I think count to 10 is a really good one in a moment of being triggered and frustrated.
10 breaths, yeah.
Being really aware too that trigger is beautiful information to tell you what's going on for you. And I often recommend patients, one, come and get acupuncture. It's really powerful in softening the liver and getting that chi flow happening, which then in turn will keep supporting and softening the liver. So I really like acupuncture for that. But then I also find that notice when you get pissed off. Notice your triggers. They're showing you something so much deeper than you're willing to see at this moment. But if you're willing and open, if you're hearing me right now and you're listening and you're like, wow, that's me, I'm an angry person, just get connected to what's triggering you. And it just starts there. And then you can come in and we can figure it out a little bit more. But I would say that. And then I really like lemon water. It's beautiful in the morning. Huge Chinese medicine aspect is to drink lemon water every day. It's massive. And I find, like, I often use the analogy like, okay, when you wake up in the morning and you just have that lemon water, it's sort of, you've had all these workers working really hard all night and they've cleared everything up and there's just the debris waiting for you to like rinse it out. And so you use this beautiful cleaning product of water and lemon and then you drink generally warm or room temperature and you drink that through and it sort of just collects all the rubbish. It's sort of like the rubbish truck that collects all the rubbish and clears it out and moves it through the system and out. So, yeah, lemon water is a big one. Acupuncture is a big one. Catching your triggers or just being aware of what's triggering you. And it's not about too much about the why, but just write down. I would recommend write down 2 or 3 times you get triggered. And just sit in that, see what is that triggering me? What do you recommend, Matt?
Well, the first thing that came to my mind when you were talking there was people who don't sleep very well, particularly between 1 and 3. That's when the liver's most active. So between 11 and 1, it's the gallbladder. 1 and 3 is liver, and 3 and 5 is lung. So people that often consistently wake up at those times and usually can't fall back to sleep very easily, check that organ. You can detox it. Anything dark leaf and greeny dark leafy and green would make more sense. That will help the liver. Water will help the liver. Breathing will help the liver because your liver will detox literally everything you put on your skin and everything that you eat.
So eat organic and don't put stuff on your skin.
Pesticides are really bad for the liver. So organic would be the way to go. But it's just simple things.
Oh, I mean, let's just go back to the pillars of health. You got episode 2 and 3 you can go straight to.
But from a psychological viewpoint, if you find someone who's triggering, right? So let's say you triggered me.
Never happens.
Never. Then I would write down 3 negative things and 3 positive things.
How big is your book?
I've got novel 6 coming out. Titled Nula.
3 good things, 3 bad things.
Yeah, 3 positive, 3 negative, and then see and then do the same for myself. And what you'll often find is the person triggering you is just you.
Yeah.
It's just aspects of yourself every single time.
Yeah.
Once you can identify that, then you're ready to actually grow up and say, oh, that is me.
Right.
They're showing me.
Yeah, I'm just pointing the finger and 3 fingers pointing back at me.
So next time you point, use your whole hand.
I'm very mindful of that.
Yeah.
It was you.
The claw, yes.
I hope that was enjoyable. And if you're an angry person, just know that you're not alone. The world is full of angry people, but know that you can also channel it into really great things. So power to you for seeing that in yourself and
ask, what would love do now?
Peace.
You've been listening to The Wizard and The Priestess. Thanks for stopping by. Stay connected and be open.